Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers. It's time to do another A to Z of hidden gems, or A to Z if you insist, looking at a selection of games for a specific system and picking out games that you might have overlooked. This time round we're doing the mighty Gamecube, one of my favourite systems because, yeah, I'm a bit of a Nintendo kid. But this is going to be a little different from my previous A to Z series, as the Gamecube has a relatively small library compared to Sony's systems. Normally I'd do 10 games per letter, but there just aren't enough games on this system to do that here. So instead I'm going to do 3 games per letter and have 3 letters per video. So that's still about 81 games that you might have missed for your sexy purple cube. But anyway, that's enough ramble, so how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button and we take a look at some games. First up is Amazing Island from Sega. Here you choose to play as either a boy or a girl, though it doesn't matter who you choose. You are exploring your grandparents' attic and you find a book about a mysterious island. And you're interested in it, and it turns out that the island is real and magical, and you end up getting transported there. The island is in trouble though, as an evil monster is taking over and brainwashing the locals to make them evil. Because you're pure of heart, you can't be affected and have to sort the whole mess out. But you can't go around fighting monsters because you're a kid. So instead you go to a magic mirror where you're asked a bunch of questions, and then what's cool is that depending on the answers you give, a monster of your own is created. I really like this idea, and the monster I ended up creating is an absolute abomination, and I love him, her, or it. Your monster also has various stats depending on your answers. Once you've done all that, you then have to explore the island where you'll meet a bunch of crazy characters. Eventually you get to the meat of the game, which is not at all what I expected. Basically, you play a bunch of mini-games. I really thought this was going to be an action RPG or something. But instead, you have to use your monster to take part in a bunch of different games. These range from racing other creatures, skipping across water, collecting a certain number of things in a time limit, battling other monsters in what is essentially a game of Beyblade, or even shooting some hoops. It's very random. The stats of your monster will affect how good they are at the various different mini-games, as you'll need strength, stamina, or good mental ability. You can boost these stats using potions that you win from competing in the games, and you can replay the games as often as you want. The better you do at them, the better the prize you win, which can include potions to boost your stats, or even new skins or accessories for your monster. And that's another big thing here, you can customize your monster using all the bits you unlock, and doing this will change its stats depending on what your monster looks like. Alternatively, if you just hate your monster, you can go back to the magic mirror at any time to create a new one, but be aware that doing this will get rid of your old monster completely, and you do kind of get attached to them. Playing the games themselves is fine, but I did find a few of them quite frustrating to learn, though that is the challenge I suppose. You will often need to replay the same game multiple times to win, and here you have to complete in a series of games before taking on a boss. If you lose a game too many times, then you have to go back and replay all of the ones before it, which can be a pain when you're figuring out what the game wants you to actually do. Thankfully, there is a practice mode, and this does come in handy. But the controls in them do actually work well enough, and I only felt that I lost games because I was figuring out the mechanics, not because the controls were shoddy. It all looks okay, it's got a very Sega look. It's bright and colourful, and the random monster designs are often quite funny, though not intentionally. The customization on them all is good though, and after you've beaten a few games, you can actually design a whole monster from scratch. This is a game I never hear anyone talking about, and it is actually quite fun. You can play against a friend as well, which would be good, being a sort of mix between Mario Party and the Monkey Ball mini-games. Worth a look if you like this sort of thing. Asterix and Obelix XXL is a 3D action platform game starring everyone's favourite potion-guzzling ghouls. As always, the Romans are being bastards and trying to take everything over, so our heroes Asterix and Obelix set out on an adventure that takes them all over the world, kicking butticus. It starts out with Romans trying to invade your village, but Asterix and Obelix soon put a stop to that. You do the usual 3D platforming thing of running around all over the place, jumping like a maniac and collecting as much stuff as you can. Thankfully, there's only a few things you need to worry about getting here though. You need to collect Roman helmets, of which there are hundreds laying around all over the place. These are basically your currency and can be used to buy things at the various vendors that you meet on your adventure. Then there's the golden crest things. These are harder to find, and there's usually only 10 or so on each level. Now you don't really need to collect these to progress the story, but it's sort of fun to explore the levels and complete the various mini-games that you have here that you need to do to earn them. You can play as either Asterix or Obelix, and they do play very similarly to one another for the most part. It doesn't really matter who you play as, but there are sections of the game that do force you to use a certain character to interact with certain things. You can switch between the characters at specific change stations, which is a bit of a shame as it would have been nice to just have a button to switch, but oh well, small gripe there. There's a lot of enemies to fight as well, mostly Romans and pirates like in the comics. The combat here is simple enough and you only need to worry about punching bad guys in the face until they go flying off the screen. But some of the larger enemies have more armour and a shield, and you'll need specific tactics like hitting them from behind or just waiting for them to drop their guard. What's cool is that the character you aren't playing as is still always with you, so they will also do some of the fighting and generally do a good job of looking after themselves. I really like the variety in the levels here. There's only 5 or so, but they are large and pretty open, with plenty to do if you want to collect everything in them. Though it's not a crazy long game and you can beat it in about 5 hours, which honestly is perfect for a game like this. Something I really like are the graphics. This is a really good looking game, with plenty of detail everywhere and some great use of colour, and all the levels look vastly different from one another, which is nice. The only thing that is a little bit iffy is some of the animation, mainly for your attacks. They look a bit sped up and awkward, but still, the combat is fine itself, so it works well enough. It's a shame that this is a single player game though, as having a co-op mode where someone plays as the other character would have been really good fun. Unfortunately, this was only released in Europe, which I guess isn't sad for me, but you can buy the remastered version for all modern consoles, and after playing this one, I actually did buy it for my PlayStation 5. I think it's definitely worth playing if you like 3D platformers like I do. Next up is Army Men: Sarge's War. This is a third-person action game based on the Army Men toys. You know, the little green and tan ones that you had as a kid. Now there's actually a whole load of these Army Men games, but this is only the second one that I've ever played. The story here is that Sarge is fighting an attack from the Tan Army and learns they have big plans of domination and need to be stopped. They use portals to travel between their world and what is essentially the real world where we live. This means you'll be spending your time between a world where everything is normal for the toy army men featuring towns and so on similar to ours, and then you go through a portal and you're transported to a world where they're toy size and use things like sandcastles as bases. It's actually a pretty cool idea. And honestly, this game was a lot more fun than I expected. The gameplay itself is pretty damn basic. The levels are linear and it's little more than a case of following the paths, taking out the bad guys and occasionally completing a number of objectives. These objectives are normally things like collecting intel or blowing something up, and they are easily accessible through the pause menu, so you're rarely left not knowing what you need to do. The main focus here though is shooting evil tan people. This is easily done thanks to a decent variety of weapons. You get rifles, machine guns, sniper rifles, rocket launchers and more, and all of them have their own ammo counts and accuracy and power, etc. As you'd expect with the weapons, I suppose. So you'll be swapping between them all the time to match the situation you're in. You have a lock-on ability which is also very handy, letting you lock onto enemies and blast them till they fall apart. Thankfully the enemies are pretty damn dumb, so they don't really bother to try and dodge or hide, they'll just stand there taking bullets to the face, meaning this isn't the most challenging of games. What did surprise me though is how seriously the game takes itself. It isn't exactly trying to tell a harrowing tale of war, but I was kind of expecting there to be some silly references or jokes about how they're toys, but there's none of that here. It's like it wanted to make a proper game, but were forced to use a toy license. It's kind of odd. But the game is still fun. It is a decidedly average game, but that's kind of the point of these videos. Games that aren't going to blow you away, but are still fun for what they are. The missions are varied enough, the game controls well, and thankfully doesn't try to overcomplicate things. You can go first person to take enemies down, but you can't move in this mode, so it's mainly for sniping. You'll use your lock-on ability for everything else. It looks alright. Again, it's just average looking for the system, but as I've said before in videos, I have a real soft spot for games that put you as small things in big worlds, so I really like the missions in the real world. Overall, this is actually a fun game that will probably only take you about 3 hours to get through. I almost actually completed it on my first session, but I wanted to come back to finish it off, so it must have been doing something right. Let's get out of our army gear and into our bikinis now with Beach Spikers Virtual Volleyball. When I was in college, my friends and I played a hell of a lot of Beach Spikers. It's an arcade volleyball game that is a great pick up and play title that everyone can get used to after just a few games. Now, it's volleyball, so there's not a whole lot that I need to talk about really. You have a few game modes. There's a championship, single matches and tutorial. You can choose what country you want to play as, each with their own stats, and then you're off to play some ball. Gameplay is simple. It's 2-on-2 volleyball and you can play with up to 4 players. Then the aim of the game is just to hit the ball to the floor on your opponent's side of the net. It's volleyball. Controlling the game is easy. You only really have 3 buttons to worry about. When the ball comes to you, you can pass to your other player who can then set you up for a spike. Or you can try to be cheeky and knock the ball back over the net, which is easier for your opponents to return, but if they're not expecting it, you might catch them off guard. But the spikes are where it's at. When you set them up, the camera zooms in and a power bar appears. You obviously want it as high as possible, and you can also point with the analog stick where you want the ball to go, so you want to try and stick it anywhere that there isn't an opponent player. You do always get an indicator on your floor showing you where the ball is going to land, which is very handy and gives you a fair chance to return hits from your opponents. It's still not easy though, and doing the tournament means your teams get progressively more tricky, and some can be a real pain in the ass to beat, but you can do it, I believe in you. But the real appeal here is just how easy to pick up and play this game really is. You can easily lose an evening playing this with some friends. It looks decent enough, again, very Sega, and surprisingly they haven't made everything super sexy and bouncy, but it certainly isn't Dead or Alive extreme. The main downside here though is there isn't a whole lot of content. It's basically just a volleyball tournament. There's not really anything to unlock or anything like that, which is always a shame, but the gameplay is solid and enjoyable. And if you do the sort of campaign mode here, you can create your own characters and you can make them weird colours and have green women if you want to. And what's cool is you can actually increase your partnership to make yourselves work better as a team. It's a nice concept. But yeah, don't overlook this one, especially if you like games to play with friends. Battalion Wars is a really cool strategy game that can take a bit of time to get used to, but is absolutely worth it. It's a real-time strategy game, but instead of being a top-down one like Command and Conquer and so on, instead this is a third-person game where you actually control units directly, as well as giving your rest of your squad orders. The story isn't anything groundbreaking. There's various factions and there's a truce going on. Then one day while you're out on a training mission, you come across some of the evil Tundrans and they're spying on you, thus kicking off another war that you need to win. And despite what it seems like, this has nothing to do with the popular Advance Wars games, though if Wikipedia is to be believed, it was at one point going to tie in. Either way, it's really fun, and I don't know anyone that's played it, and I only started playing it for this series, and I'm glad I did. Each mission gives you a number of objectives to complete, as well as a limited number of units with which to complete the mission. Unit types include a number of infantry units like riflemen, bazooka men, missile chaps, flamethrower people, and so on. Then you have a pretty good number of vehicles throughout the game as well. You get scout cars, tanks, planes, choppers, and so on. Then each level puts you into a fairly large battleground where you're told what you need to do. As you'd expect, you need to plan your attacks pretty carefully as each unit type has its strengths and weaknesses against other unit types. For example, your riflemen are really good against bazooka guys, but the bazooka guys are very strong against your tanks and other vehicles. For flying enemies, you want to use your missile troops with their homing abilities, and for other tanks, gun nests and so on, you want to use your tanks. There's more to it than that, but that's the basics. But the real cool thing here is that you can individually control each unit on the battlefield. The game is always played in third person, and you can choose to run your singular unit around the map trying to kill everyone by yourself if you want to, but really that will never work. So if you want to check your map and the intel to see what units are laying in wait for you, and then select a squad of units strong enough against those ones to take them out, before moving on to the next group of enemies and doing the same again. It's really damn fun. Switching units can take a bit of getting used to. You use the C stick to select the ones that you want, and then you press the Z button to take control of that specific unit. You can also give orders to all of the units that you're not in control of. You can tell an individual person to go and do something, or you can command a whole specific unit type, or you can just tell everyone at once to do something. Again, it can take a bit of getting used to and sounds a little confusing, but it's essential for winning and not too hard to get used to. It is really challenging though. The game doesn't go easy on you at all, and I've had to replay missions plenty of times while trying to figure out the best way to win them. As you have a limited number of units per level, if these are killed, it's back to the start for you. It all looks really great too. The game has some really cool graphics and a really good cartoony style, but it's very detailed. The animation is excellent as well, and everything plays super smoothly. I think the controls and learning curve could put a few people off here, but it is a game that's really rewarding the more you learn and play. And when you do beat that mission that you've been stuck on, it's so satisfying, and unlocking new unit types as you play gives you even more reason to come back. I'd say this is a must-have for the system. Bionicle Heroes is a third-person action game based on the popular Lego thingy that I know nothing about. You are a Mataran, whatever that is, and you appear on an island and are told that evil robot people have taken over the various regions of the island and have turned the inhabitants into monsters. As that's not very nice, you set off to stop them by shooting their faces off, quite literally. This game is all about masks. There's a ton of masks all over the game, and these basically transform you into various different forms and give you different abilities and weapons. The forms are pretty much all element based, so you've got wind, water, fire, electric and so on. I'm sure I've probably got that a bit wrong, so someone who's a fan of Bionicle will probably correct me. They all have silly names, so I just call them red, green, yellow and so on. And each of the forms' weapons vary wildly. The fire is a rapid fire flamethrower, air is more like a shotgun thing, then there's a grenade. Then one of the colours has a grenade-like attack, there's an electric buzzer thing that's more close range, a sniper shot and so on. The variety is very good, and each of the weapons has unlimited ammo, but they do have vastly different power, range and fire rates. You'll soon find your favourite one that you'll try to stick to. For me it was either the fire or air ones, though you will at times need to use the others. The abilities also come into use a lot throughout the levels. For example, the water form lets you move through water of course, air lets you jump between certain platforms, and the black masks lets you climb certain surfaces. Silver lets you zoom in with binocular vision and gives you that sniper rifle I mentioned, and one of the forms lets you be a Jedi and interact with various things in the scenery, basically letting you create platforms, items and even helper creatures out of piles of Lego using what is essentially the Force. The levels are nice and varied, seeing you go through the usual gaming tropes of jungles, caves, forests, ice levels, water levels and so on, but they're all quite large and filled with secrets. They are quite linear, but you might need to replay levels a few times if you want to collect everything. Also, you have a health bar, and instead of dying when you lose all your health, the mask you're wearing is just destroyed, and you won't have access to its abilities until you find another one. Lose all of your health when you don't have any masks, and that's when you'll die. This can change the levels a lot as you play, as there's certain paths or doors that can only be opened with specific masks, or accessed with specific masks, and not having the right one at the time might mean you have to take a different route. I actually really like this idea, and it's another way to give the levels some good replay value. There's plenty of enemies in the game, mostly just bug-looking Lego things. Attacking is easy, as you automatically lock onto enemies, so you just need to look in their direction and hold the attack button down. Killing enemies, as well as destroying lots of the scenery, will give you Lego bits, the same as it does in the other Lego games like Star Wars and so on. You'll want to collect as much of these as you can, as it powers you up and makes you really invincible for a few seconds. And also, between levels, you can visit a shop where you can upgrade mask powers, as well as buy items to help you track down the hidden things in the levels if you want to unlock everything, including new characters and masks. It's really fun to play through the levels, and this is the second Bionicle game that I've played, and both have been really good. The level design is simple but fun, and often quite challenging. It looks good, and I do really like how they incorporate the Lego aspects into real looking environments. It does have a big reliance on that bloom filter that was popular at the time, which can make things look a little blurry, but overall it's very good and the variety in the worlds is great. I didn't expect too much from this game, but it's one that I really found hard to put down. Definitely recommended. The Gamecube wasn't known for having an abundance of shooters, but here's one for you, it's Chaos Field. I'm not entirely sure of the story here, as the game doesn't really offer one, but it's a vertically scrolling space shooter, so I think we can all make our own one up and it'll basically be correct. The main thing here is the shooting, and Chaos Field certainly has lots of that. You can choose from 3 pilots, each of which has their own weapon loadouts. You get the standard shoot forward laser person, who is your all-rounder. Then there's the guy who shoots explosive shots. These are more powerful but have a slower rate of fire. Then there's the homing lady, who locks onto enemies and fires a constant stream, but it is of course the weakest. I found they were all quite good to use though, but seemed to do the best with the homing lady, as then I had more time to avoid the enemy bullets. And there's a lot of enemy bullets. In fact, this might be bordering on the bullet hell genre. And it's a bit of a strange game as well. It's pretty much entirely made up of boss fights, apart from the first minute or so when you're killing a few enemy ships, presumably to let you get used to the controls, which are pretty simple. You've got a shoot button, a switch button that lets you switch between your ship's fire modes, and you have a sword button, and also a bomb attack that does massive damage to everything on screen. Shooting is exactly what you'd expect in a shooter. You hold down the button and let your ship do its thing. It's the sword that really mixes things up. This lets you slice through enemy bullets, not all of them though, so you'll need to avoid some bullets and use your sword to clear away others if you want to survive. Your ship does have a bit of a shield, letting you take a couple of hits before you die though. Almost every enemy is a boss, and they have a massive life bar as well as a time limit. You obviously need to try and take the bosses down within the time limit, though if you don't, there is no penalty. Instead, you just move on to the next one and don't get as many points for the stage. The bosses are tough though. They fire a ridiculous amount of shots, which makes things really hard to keep track of, but that's kind of the point, I suppose. Destroying parts of the ship will make them drop orbs. You can collect these by touching them or by holding in the sword button, and they'll be drawn to you. But you won't be able to use your sword while you're doing that. These orbs power you up and let you use your second form, which is more powerful, and also use your bomb attack and replenish it. There's times where you have to really be careful as you need to get the orbs or just avoid the bullets. You get a handful of continues here, they aren't unlimited, and it can be very tough to beat some of the bosses, and as with all games like this, learning their patterns is essential. I did find it was a bit of a shame that there aren't any proper levels or anything like that though. It is all just a boss rush, and it would have been nice to have more content, as this is definitely one of the game's downsides. There's just not a lot here. In terms of graphics, it's fine, certainly nothing special, and everything has that classic grey and brown look of the era. But the controls are solid and the music is pretty good. I did have fun with the fast, frantic action. Check it out if you're a fan of shooters. Here is Conan, a third-person action-adventure game about everyone's favourite half-naked sack of meat. You are Conan, and your village has been burned to the ground by the evil vulture cult. But what they didn't realise is you have a massive sword, so you set out across the land to track down their bastards and put sharp things in them. It's a third-person hack-and-slash adventure, and Conan will spend most of his time exploring a range of landscapes from dangerous mountains, ghostly swamps, monster-filled snowy tundras, evil temples, dark forests, enemy villages, caves, and more. Your mission is to just murder your way through these places until you get to the leader of the vultures. So the majority of what you'll be doing is stabbing people, and the combat here is alright. You have a weak and strong attack button and can do various combinations of these buttons to do different attacks. Killing enemies gets you experience, which you can then use to buy even more attacks, which is nice. There's quite a few you can unlock, and each one has 3 levels of power, giving it more damage and making you more deadly. Some of the combos are needlessly complicated though, needing you to press the shoulder buttons and another button at the same time, followed by something like ABBA, and I just found that I didn't really bother with these ones and just stuck with the regular attacks that are fast and do decent enough damage. You can also block, which is essential if you want to survive, as you're often fighting lots of enemies at once. You'll fight some of the local wildlife, which are usually souped up versions of real animals like wolves but with spikes on them, that sort of thing. You also get to fight a lot of monsters like snow variant sandworms and even ice demons. And there's plenty of tribes and clans that try to get in your way as well, so there's enough humans that will be getting the chop. As you progress, you'll find new weapons and armour that you can switch between, usually changing your various stats in terms of speed, power and so on. Also, weapons have different combos and some are better against certain enemy types. For example, you'll want to use a heavy weapon against some of the ice enemies, as light weapons will hurt them, but you'll bounce off them when you attack, so can't use combos. The heavy weapons, however, will slice through them still. This is a nice mechanic and a good way to make sure you try out all the different weapons. The levels are pretty big, but very linear. You basically follow just one path to the end. This will involve some light puzzle solving, which is basically killing people until you find a key that you need, and you also get a map of every area, which is pretty handy, as there do tend to be a few paths you can take, and you can make sure you don't run into any dead ends. There's also traps in a lot of the areas, so you'll need to avoid falling spikes or boulders, as well as swinging things that will batter you all over the place. In fact, the traps were actually what killed me most of the time, and I found those the most dangerous. There are items you can collect to replenish your health. and what's nice is you can carry 5 of them in your inventory. Then if you do find any when you have 5, these will just replenish your health automatically, but if you need to, you'll need to go into the pause menu where you can find your items and use the other ones from there. And don't forget to upgrade your combos while you're at it. There is some basic platforming here, and this is definitely one of the game's drawbacks. The jumping here is pretty jerky and awkward and hard to control. I did always let out a bit of a sigh when I made it through one of these sections. You meet a few friendly characters along the way, but they're really only there for story purposes and you never get to play as anyone else. In terms of looks, it's fine. It's pretty basic looking and it does have some nice animation, but it's kind of slow and the controls are a little clunky, though I do say that the game is still perfectly playable. This is another game that I've owned since it was first released, and I still own it to this day. It is more fun than it looks, so don't let its very basic presentation put you off. And if you do see it in the wild, I'd say it's worth picking up, as it seems to be pretty rare. And finally for today, here is Cubix, Robots for Everyone Showdown. This is an action RPG based on a kids show that I've never seen. In short, it's basically a weird stripped down version of Pokemon with robots. You play as either Connor or Abby, who have just moved to a new town that is populated by robots. You have your own one called Cubix, who is, unsurprisingly, made of cubes. As you explore the new town, you meet a bunch of other strange characters, some good, some bad, as well as a bunch of other robots, 24 other robots in fact, that you can battle and add to your robo collection. So the game sees you exploring the town, which is done as whichever character you choose. Most screens in the game involve some sort of puzzle, usually a block pushing one. You'll need to complete this in order to collect items, open new areas, or sometimes get to the robots that you need to fight. These puzzle sections are kind of fun and can get pretty challenging for stupid people like me. You need to push and stack blocks to reach high areas, create bridges and things like that. This is all done easily, and if you do mess up, you can just press the Z button to reset the puzzle. If you fall into water, you'll lose health, which is represented by a row of donuts, but there's plenty of them to collect. You'll also see other robots all over the place. Most of them can't be battled, instead you just need to avoid them. Touching one will reset the puzzle and you'll lose some health. You can also find batteries in these sections. These can be used to fill your power meter. This power is then distributed among your robots that you own to refill their health between battles. What makes it kinda easy though is that all the items respawn when you leave a screen, so you can just go back and forth between screens and to make sure you always have full power and it's easy to stay at full health. Eventually though, you will find a robot that's malfunctioning. These are the ones that you'll battle and keep. There's only 25 in total, which isn't really a whole lot, and there's no random battles, instead you just collect them all as part of a linear story. The battles themselves are simple, but still kinda confusing. You can choose up to 3 robots to send into any one battle. Robots have various traits though. You have power, water, fire, electricity and so on. And yep, some are weaker or stronger against others, so you'll need to make sure that you take the right ones into battle with you or you'll get smashed to bits in seconds. Then you choose your attack, of which every robot basically has 3. You have a strong attack, which is powerful but means you take more damage when the enemy attacks you, a medium attack, which is of mid power and the damage you take is middle, and then there's a defensive attack, which doesn't do much damage to your opponent, but means that you won't take as much when you're attacked. So you choose your attack, and then you have chips that you can add as well. These give you boosts like making your attack do double damage or be unblockable, or you can put a virus on your opponent making it harder to hit you, or you can even steal their health, that sort of thing. As long as your attack hits, the chip takes effect. To actually do the attack, it's a bit annoying though. You've got a spinning wheel and you have to time your button press so the marker lands on a solid bit of the wheel. If it hits the other bit, then you miss. But the thing is, the marker doesn't stop immediately when you press the button, so your timing is a real pain in the ass here. Still, the game is fairly forgiving and obviously made for kids, and although I did lose battles every now and then, it was never hard to power through. Your bots will level up as you play as well, and fighting is the best way to do this, but you can also find cubes in the levels which gives you power boosts. It is important to hunt these down, and I'm pretty sure some of them respawn like the other items, so you can be cheap and farm them for a bit if you have the patience, making yourself pretty powerful. And that's really all there is to the game. It's a very simple turn-based RPG, though there is something kind of addictive about it. I think it's because I just like collecting things and making them level up. It looks alright as well. The robots have fun designs and some of the attacks look cool, but there's very few of them, so you will be skipping a lot of the animations soon after seeing them once or twice. So yeah, this isn't exactly a groundbreaking game, but again, that's what this series is about. Games that are fun for what they are. Give it a go if you think it looks alright. So there you go, some games on the Gamecube starting with the letter A, B and C that you might not have tried. Which one is your favourite and what other games could I have included? There's not a whole lot more, so as always let me know in the comments below. I want to thank my patron for his support, it's really appreciated, and you too can join where I have more content including reviews too hot for YouTube, gaming challenges, podcasts and more. Link is in the description below. And on screen now you can see where else you can follow me, so why not do so? I've got loads of great content for everyone to enjoy. And now what's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.